We're about to begin Perek Shlishi, chapter 3, Bakol Me'arvin. And before we go to the Perek, let me share with you some word of introduction. The first subject is the subject of measurement of Shabbat, Tchum Shabbat. Meaning, we explain it while we study Tractate Shabbat, that we measure from the end of the city 2,000 amah to each side. We explain that there is a certain domain that a person is dwelling, and that's called Makom Shvita. That's the place that the person is permanently there. Now, the whole concept of Eruvei Tchumim, meaning there is two different avenues. One school of thought that said that it's a biblical. The Torah tells us in a Parashat Beshalach, in a biblical portion of Beshalach, book of Exodus, that they said, Al Yetze Ish Min Komo Bayom HaShvi'i. While the children of Israel were in a wilderness, and they wandering, they said that when it's come to the seventh day, people should not move out, meaning a long distance from one location to another. Here is a different school of thought. First school of thought saying that Al Yetzeish mid deoraita, that that's a biblical prohibition to extend it, as the rabbis tells us, more than 2,000 cubits. Now, most of the Tanaik say that it's midivrei sofrim, that it's a rabbinic. There are those who said that what the Torah meant is 24,000 cubits, because if you go by the way the children of Israel wandering in the desert, the whole distance was 24,000. So there's another school of thought, and there is a Rashi that we study in Tractate Shabbat, page 34a, that he said that everything is midivrei sofrim, it's all rabbinic. Meaning rabbinic derivative in oral teaching from the Torah that make the measurement of Tchum Shabbat. The moment a person kana shvitato, which means he dwell in that place and that his permanent stay, that's the place he's staying, from that point we measure 2,000 cubits. Now, there are two ways to make the Eruv. One way is if you need to just go for up to 2,000 amot, you measure from that spot and you go further. If you need to extend it for another 2,000, one resolution is in advance, you make a pre-plan and you put in the neighborhood of the 2,000 amot, 2,000 cubit food that's sufficient for the meal, not one but 2 meals. That's the minimum amount for Shabbat. And from that point he can walk further another 2,000 amat. Why? Because the place of dwelling, Mekom HaShvita, now turns, since he said it in advance before Shabbat, as Mekom Shvita. Another option, if a person walk in advance from one location to the others, which means in a way we call it in Ivrit Eruv Baraglaim, that you do it with your own feet, you just go and therefore you made it, that's location to another. That's the Gemara further will tell us in 49. Now, the issue here is, number one, in a distance between your location to the place you're planning to go, or the place that you put the food. Second issue is the eating of the food in that location, either according to halacha or according to the reality of the circumstance. So, in general, if it's not fitting to eat by either one of them, then you cannot use it. With that in mind, we can get the foundation of the upcoming discussion. In the upcoming perek, especially in the beginning, the Mishnah, dealing particularly with Eruv Tchumim. So again, before we go to the Mishnah, I want to mention some point in difference between Eruv Tchumim and Eruvei Chatzerot. I know that some of you are familiar, but just to make sure that we know the difference. Eruv Chatzerot applies when you have several neighbors that want to have a join of the property for the sake of carrying in that specific development from one location to another. They collected food in one of the houses, and as a result, each person in that development can carry from his house to another house. It's called Eiruvei Chatzerot, courtyard Eiruv. The Eiruv that we discuss in general at this point in a perek is Eruvei Tchumim. We're planning to discuss Eruvei Chatzerot in a Mishnah a little bit, and then here and there, but in general term, we're more focusing on Eruvei Tchumim than Eruvei Chatzerot. Last point. There is another one that is called Shitufei Mevo'ot. Very similar to Eruvei Chatzerot. You have an alleyway that it's basically in between a private domain, yet it leads from one house to another. In a sense, it's very similar to Eruvei Chatzerot. Meaning, if you have, for example, I'm just using it for the sake of understanding, I have several relatives that live in the old city, in a Jewish quarter in Jerusalem. So they live in the place that is an alleyway cross. If you know the old city, it's like you go to many old cities worldwide, you have an alleyway, it's like mevo'ot, in between their houses. Now, in order for the people to carry, they have to have shituf, they need to be partner in that area, so that alleyway it's basically turned to be totally private domain. We're on the bottom of 26b, Mishnah. Bakol me'arvin u'mishtatfin chutz min hamayim u'min hamelach. This type of Eruvei Tchumim, that we go up to 2,000 amah, in order for a person to go a distance of another 2,000 amah, it says everything you can make Eruvei Tchumim, one may establish a joining area, and umishtatfim, that's applied to shitufei mevo'ot. You have an alleyway and you join together, merge together. Now, Rashi said that that's specifically for Eruvei, that's applied to, not specifically, but applied to both Eruvei Chatzerot and Eruvei Tchumim. Tosfot asking question that you basically needs to use a bread to make that type of Eruv Chatzerot, and Tosfot hold that that's only for Eruvei Tchumim. Anyway, Chutz min hamayim, excluding the water and the salt, because this, again, the issue is that it's not considering a food. It's not something that you prepare a regular meal for. Vehakol nikach, and all this type of food that you prepare for that purpose of Eruv, such as Eruvei Chatzerot, Shitufei Mevo'ot, you can use Bechesef Ma'aser. As we explained many times, there are several tithe. One of them is the second tithe you give in Yerushalayim. So the second tithe, you bring in the first, the second, the fourth, and the fifth year of the sabbatical year. So you need to eat it in Yerushalayim, the person who give it, or you need to redeem it and bring the money to Yerushalayim and buy food over there. So what type of food you can buy in that money? So they said, chutz min hamayim umin hamelach. Again, excluding water and salt.
We don't tithe.
What?
Do we tithe water and salt?
No.
So I guess I'm just
it's
wondering why
a famous story
they
about a midrash about Esav.
Right.
That he went and he tried to impress his father, so he asked him how to tithe salt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not considering a fruit.
That's why I'm just wondering why they mention it there, why they exclude it specifically, even though it's not tithe. So.
Yeah, there is a reason for that. The Gemara later in the page 30 explain.
Mm-hmm.
They tell us in page 30 that they based on Rashi that said V'sa'adu libchem, when he treated in Parshat Vayera in Bereshit, he treated the guests, the unknown guests. So he told them that you should, it was the angels, but he fed them. The Torah said that he fed them with food. So the Gemara tells us that food, meaning something that mas'idet halev, that bring the body, the heart in that sense, to a state of equanimity, calmness. And salt or water, it's not sufficient in that sense to considering a feast or a meal. Now, there is another point I would like to mention here. When you use the word, we use the word bakol me'arvin u'mishtatfin, one may establish a joining. The Gemara later asks a question: Mali chatzer, mali mavoi, mali reshut harabim. What's the difference between the courtyard, the alleyway, the public domain? And they explain that it's a sage's decree that a person should not carry between the courtyard food, that but instead they collected the food and put it in one of the houses. So basically, the minute you do that in Erovei Chatzerot, it's considering Reshut Me'orevet. That is a combination of many, because all the food is collected in one of the houses. So that's apply also to Mavoi. You have a post, a lechi, or crossbeam, korah. So the people, Bnei Chatzerot, people who live in a different yards, they cannot carry until they make the Eruv in one of the courtyard. And the same apply to Shitufei Mevorot. Remember we said that Shlomo, the King Solomon, and his Bet Din made the Shitufei Mevorot, the combination of several alleyways, and therefore that's, you see what's involved here. As I said, it's mainly about Eruvei Tchumin. So he said Me'arvin Eruvei Tchumin, the 2,000 amot, lenazir beyain, in order for Nazirite, in the wine, that he basically not allowed to drink it. It's a side note, there is a Tshuvot Rabbi Akiva Iger that he asked why Rashi here divided between different type of Eruvin, and further on why they use this example. But I'm just saying it as a side note, as a reference. Ule Yisrael bitruma, even Yisrael not allowed to eat a truma, a contribution, only the time of the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohanim allow, yet you can use that for the purpose of Eiruvin and truma in general, that they give it to the Kohanim in Eretz Yisrael, and it's eating just by them. Sumchus Omer Bechulin. Bechulin meaning you have sometime a donation that was given to Beit HaMikdash, and you have a state of that donation that turns to be a chulin, which means it can now no longer be used as a sacred offering. So as long as his owner can eat it. So he said, in a chulin, the issue is that the owner cannot eat it because it's still part of the temple's property. Now the question is why Sumchus disagree only in regard to Truma and not in the wine for Nazirite. That's something that the Gemara later in page 30 explains. And also Ulechohen beveit hapras. That's important. What is a beit hapras? So if you have a plowing area in the field that it was it
had a grave there originally.
A grave or body there.
Yeah.
By halacha, and that's something that we have to be very scrupulous, even the size of the dry fig or whatever it's called, seorai, the very small measure of a corpse, it's already contained state of ritual impurity. Now, with that in mind, we know that the Kohen are forbidden to go to a place that they have ritual impurity, and that applies even to the size of the seorah, like very small measurement. So they said here, since it's safek tuma, it's a question if it's a ritually impure or not, because that's the decree of the sages said from 100 cubit of the spot that the corpse is there, we ask the Kohen not to enter that domain, because when they plowing in that time, the fear is that the machine, while they're plowing it, is scattered
the bones
fragments, and the fragments, and then it can go in contact.
Right.
So they said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So I'm just going to give you a little point. The Gemara later said in which way the Kohen can go there, in a sense of preparing the Eruvei Tchumim. So they said, if he leave the Eruv there, and the Gemara used the term menapeach veolech, which again, it's not now the time, just give you the vignette.
Blow on the ground,
he blow on the ground,
right.
blow on the ground on his mouth. So therefore, in a sense, he can put there the Eruv. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu bebeit hakvarot, even in the cemetery, which is, he said that even between the graves in the graveyard, the area that the Kohen may not enter by Torah law, he can leave maniach the Eruvei Tchumin. So we now turn to our Daf 27a. מפני שיכול לחוץ וללך ולאכול. So we allow the Kohen to go to that place in a cemetery. There are two גרסאות. One said לילך ולחוץ, one said לחוץ ולילך, which means he can interpose between himself and the grave and go and eat the food, which means he can create they said later, Sheidat Teva Migdal, which means he created either wagon or something similar that contained 40 se'ah. So it's not except the state of impurity. So it's considering as a independent tent, and it's like a petition from the impurity. The key point is safek tum'ah, since it's not clear that it's impure, so therefore he can go and use it in between, even it's a cemetery, and konelo shvita, that it's become a place that he can dwell there. But the Gemara later explained the detail when is that state of safek tum'ah allow the Kohen and when is not. Now we go to the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein למדים מן הכללות, ואפילו במקום שנאמר בו חוץ. We said in the Mishnah the word bakol me'arvin. One may establish a joining, bakol, in a courtyard. So, what do you say? We said that if you remember the 13th principle of Rabbi Ishmael that we said every morning, so it means when you use that term, it means that there are situations that it's not. So he said even the place that the Tana said that that's an exception. So here you don't do that. מדכאמר אפילו במקום שנאמר בו חוץ נכלל דלאו הכה קאי. So here we said because Rabbi Yochanan said even the place where it says except, so he said that that's mean that that's not included. Rashi here said as follows. He said, מדכאמר רבי יוחנן אפילו מכלל דכי אמרינן למילתא לאו הכי. So Rashi here, ומשום אחי אמר אפילו כלומר לא לבעייך. So Rashi here used the word כלומר. I explain in my book, ביורי הכלומר ברש"י על הש"ס, that Rashi here want to focus on the word אפילו. And Rashi wants to tell us that we derive from that what Rabbi Yochanan said, that that's not in other place. So it means to say that even in a situation that it's not written the word chutz, we don't derive from the klalot, from the general rules. But again, I just give you the abbreviation. When you want, read in my book, Biurei Klomar Berashi al Hashas. So they said, Heicha Kai. So now we ask to which Mishnah then was relating to the formulated the principle. So in which Mishnah Rabbi Yochanan said what he said. Hatam Kai, that's applied in a famous Mishnah, Tractate Kiddushin, page 29a, that said, Kol mitzvat aseh shehazman grama, anashim chayavim venashim pturot. If you have a mitzvah, a positive commandment, that it's an all-time bound. Give me an example. No, anyone can give me an example of mitzvah aseh shehazman grama.
Time bound. Well, tefillin, talis and tefillin.
For example,
so various different prayers during the day.
Correct. So therefore,
counting the Yomer.
ושלא הזמן גרמה, אחד נשים ואחד אנשים חייבים. So for sure, in a practical halachot, there is a lot of gray area. But in general terms, they have a different obligations, and therefore we say that something that it's not all-time bound, positive commandment, mitzvot that can be only performed at a certain time of the day, so the women are exempt. So you see here, we try to juxtapose that point to our discussion, which is you have a general point and then you have a specific. So here they try to say that it's not compared. Why? Because they said uchlalahu bechol mitzvat aseh shazman grama nashim pturot. Is that something that you said that anything that it's all-time bound, positive commandment, women are exempt? Here is an example. We just finished the festival of freedom, Pesach. Harei matzah. We have the mitzvah of eating matzah, and that's specifically for the first night.
Yeah.
The Torah said, "Ba'erev tochlu matzot," and therefore that's applied to the first. Rashi said that the rest can use other food. So we said that it's also obligation upon women.
Also, I always thought, like, for example, candle lighting is time-based also, and that's...
Yes, but that's different. Here we talk about absolutely biblical.
Okay, I got you. So
when
these
you
are
talk
these only
about
deoraita that they're talking about, not the rabbinical.
So
Okay.
you talk about biblical, you talk the prohibition of chametz applied to everyone. So he said, the Gemara said in Kiddushin 29 that we compare when the Torah said in Dvarim, in Deuteronomy chapter 16, the Torah said, Lo tochal alav chametz, you shall not eat unleavened bread. Shiv'at yamim tochal alav matzot. 7 days you shall eat matzot. So here is a very clear statement to us, and they said that that's applied not only for men, it's applied also to women. So they said, Harei matzah, and another example, simcha, the Torah said, V'samachta ata u'beitecha. You should be in a state of gladness, you should rejoice. Beitcha ishtecha. Rashi said, your home, it's your wife. So, therefore, it's applied to both. Vehakel, in the sabbatical year, there is a mitzvah to get together at the end of the first Yom Tov of Sukkot, and the king stand on the front of the platforms, and he reads several mitzvot of Mishnei Torah. So the Torah said specifically in the Dvarim, in Deuteronomy 31, Ha'anashim ve'hanashim ve'atav. That's applied also to ladies. So you see all these examples, matzah, simcha, hakel, the mitzvat aseh she'azman gramahu, ve'nashim chayavot. This is a positive commandment, and women are obligated. Meaning that that's the example we use for mitzvah, the positive commandment that it's a time bound. That's not a absolute definite principle. The second one, v'chol mitzvat aseh shelo hazman grama nashim chayavot, and any positive commandment that it's not related to a time bound, women are obligated, so now they go via negativa, in the other way around. Harei Talmud Torah, the mitzvah of daily study Torah, priya verviya, fruitful and multiply, upidyon ben, redemption of a son, his first son, the mitzvat aseh shelo hazman grama. That's not a time-bound positive commandment. Venashim pturot. So the Torah said, "Velimadetem otam el bneichem," who said, doing Shema, right? You should teach your sons. So that's obligation you have upon the son. So you don't have the obligation. You can do it voluntarily, but you don't have the obligation to do it for the daughters. So you see here that this principle, it's not definite. Ela amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan tells us, אין למדים מן הכללות, ואפילו במקום שנאמר בו חוץ. That's something you see throughout the Talmud, that said, one may not learn from general statements, even in a place where it says, except. Why? Because it's always positive that there is other exception to the rule. So, Amar Abaye, Ve'itema Rabbi Yirmiyah, Af Anana Meitanena, now bring another source from Mishnah, Tractate Zavim, chapter 5, Mishnah 2. Od klal acher amru. They said another principle in a zav. Zav, it's a person that have a discharge that usually comes out of sickness. God forbid, there are people who have those type of sickness. So they said, Kol shenisa al gabei azav, anything that is carried upon a zav. Zav, it's a, even that he is not touching in his physical body, but he said it's called elyono shel zav, which means that he didn't touch it, but it's like getting close to him. So Tosfot explained that there is a debate. Is that considering Tum'at Heset, can be in a side, or עליונו של זב. So here, don't think that that's applied to carry impurity in the bag. It means that if zav be in contact with something that is pure, that he carries, it can change his status. I don't want to dwell here on that because it's above the scope of this discussion. But anyway, I encourage those who have the time to read the Mishnah in Zavim and also to read the Tosfot here. V'chol shehazav nisa alav, anything that he carries but it didn't touch his physical flesh, tahor, is pure, chutz min hara'ui lemishkav umoshav v'ha'adam, except for an object suitable for lying or sitting upon, and a human being, which become defiled if the zav is born on them. So the Gemara said, another point. A person that carry in his back another person that is zav, he became avatuma. I'm just giving an example.
Person carrying the zav.
The zav. I just read a book. We're getting close to Yom HaShoah. So I read a book about the Shoah, that one of the awful things that they need to do, it's proper also we now at the time that we're not shaving, is Sephira, that in a camp, they sometimes require the Nazis to have people carry people who are not capable to walk from that spot to another spot. So people who carry typhus or all kind of diseases because they are underfed and because there is a contagious, etc. People who are basically healthy supposed to carry them from one domain to another. So imagine a situation like that the person who carry another person who have this disease or have that discharge, so he became av hatum'ah by touching him. Even it's not under the category of mishkav, lying, or sitting, moshav, because the Torah said in the book of Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 16, they said v'hanoseh otam, one who carries them, yechabes bgadam v'rachatz b'mayim v'tameh ad ha'arev. So someone who carries, he transmitted. Now, if just a person carries other avot tum'ah, other type of ritual impurity, he become rishon letumah. It's a different. Zav, it's a highest. So they said vetu leka, it's but it's nothing. There is nothing else exception out of the rules. Ve'ika merkav, the place that the zav sitting on. So why we said only moshav? That the place that he's sitting it become impure. That's the Torah said clearly. So the Gemara asks, "Hai merkav hecheidame." What is the circumstances that we're dealing here? Ha'ika gaba de ukfa. Here we can speak about there is a upper part of the saddle. So he sit there, and if you pay attention to people who ride horses, they hold the saddle sometimes on the back while they're riding it. And sometimes they're not even sitting on that saddle. That's the Ritva said, and Rashi as well. So he said that Tanya, ha'ukaft b'moshav, the saddle became a ritually impure for sitting. V'hatafus, the one that is attached to the back of the animal, tmeh merkav, it's impure by sitting there. So they said, so because the back of the saddle is considering tafus and occupied, it means that this type of ritual impurity became impure even without touching. So why the Mishnah did not mention that? Ela shma mina, ein lemedim min haklalot v'afilu makom shenemar bo chutz. We derive from that one may not learn from general statements even in the place where it says except. Amar Ravina. So now we try to bring another proof from our Mishnah to the word of Rabbi Yochanan. Ravina said, Ve'itema Rav Nachman, Af anan nametanina. We also learn in the Mishnah, Bakol me'arvin, in any type of food, we can make eruvei tchumin, umishtatfim, we join in the courtyard, chutz min hamayim ve'amelach, excluding water and a salt. Vetu leika, it's not other thing in that principle, ve'aika kmehin upitriyot, but we said that that's excluding the truffles and mushrooms, that we do not do eruv with them. Why? Because we compare them to salt and water, Rashi said, because it's not a nourishes food. Some of you may disagree. If you go to the Far East, you see that they're using that, or the Amazonas in South America, they're using shiitake mushrooms. Right, is a part of mushrooms. But and the Biura Grind, or Achaim Shin Pei Vav, he explains that that's the question is that the whole, when the Mishnah said that things were taken from the tight, that is basically the question. It's not applied to the first part of the question of the point that said Bakol Me'arvin, that it's applied to the Eruvei Tchumim, but it's applied to that part, because the reality is in this truffle or mushroom you really cannot make eruv. That's a famous gra, but also you can read here in the Tosfot and the Rashash. Anyway, so they said here Ela Shma Mina. What we derive from that, again, she'ein lemedim min haklal v'afilu makom shenemar b'chutz. You're not to learn from general statements, even the place where they said except. Now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Hakol nikach bekesef maaser chutz min hamayim ve'amelach. All types of food may be brought with a second tight money, excluding water and salt. So Rabbi Elazar or Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, they learn the same thing about salt and water. Chad matnei ha'eruv v'chad matnei ha'maaser. One in eruv and one learn in regard to the second tight. Chad matnei ha'eruv. One teaches the halacha with regard to the issue of eruv. Lo shanu ela mayim b'fnei atzmo umelach b'fnei atzmo de'ein me'arvin. That since each of them alone is not considering a nourishes food, so it's applied individually to each of them, either water or salt. Aval b'mayim umelach me'arvim. If you combine the two, water and salt, you can take the bread and make tibul like we're doing on Passover evening. Yep. So it's considering a mazon, considering a food. V'chad matnei ha'maaser. And the other one teaches the halacha with regard to the second type. Lo shanu el hamayim b'fnei atzmo umelach b'fnei atzmo de'en nikachin. That's apply solely to only water or salt, that you cannot use the second type for that. Aval mayim v'melach nikachin bekesef maaser. But combine the two, you can do it. Mana matnei ha'maaser. What's really the difference? Who is the one who teach in regards to second type that salt and water can use for the second type? Kol sheken ha'eruv. For sure he hold that's apply to the more so to apply to the eruv, which means that he for sure hold that that water and salt together are suitable to use for an eruv. Uman de matnei ha'eruv, but the one, however, that learned for the eruv, that he said aval ha'maaser lo, but he forbids to purchase when you go to Yerushalayim in order to to purchase salty water for the purpose of second tithe. My tama, what's the reason? Peira ba'inan. He require produce, so it means that it has to be not just food, but peirei. it doesn't mean that it's fruit itself, but it means including fish or meat or other things, but as long as it's a produce. Let's face it, people cannot in salty water satiate themselves.
Right.
Kiata Rabbi Yitzchak, when Rabbi Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylon, Matnei Maaser, he learned this in regard to Maaser, that you can use salty water for tithe. And Meitivei, they asked him for the following bright. Id Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish lifnei Rabbi Eliezer, shel Beit Abba היו לוקחים ציר בכסף מעשר. They used to take for fish brine. Thank you, fish brine, because it's good for dipping, for the tithe. אמר לו, שמא לא שמעת, אלא שקרבי דגים מעורבים בהם. That it's not just the brine, it's a real fish combined. ואפילו רבי יהודה בן גדיש לא כאמר אלא בציר. You only send the brine, the shumra defirahu, because regard to brine, which is the fat of the produce, because a certain amount of fish fat, which is self, may be produced with a second tithe money. אבל מים ומלח לא, but water and salt not. So now you see a contradiction to what Rabbi Yitzchak said, that he allowed to use the salty water for in the tithe. So Amar Rav Yosef responds, and he said it's not that difficult. 27b, לא נצרכה אלא שנתן לתוכה שמן. That he combined the salty water with the oil. So that's considering produce or so you can purchase, but independently salty water, it's not enough. Omar alei Abai v'teipuk lemishum shemen. So you can buy this combination because you can have the oil that it's considering a produce. That he combined the all in the money he gave all together. So the money of the oil is within that. So Rabbi Yitzchak come and teach us that you cannot buy salty water by itself for the tithe, but you can do it be'avla'at. So you see here a very basic foundation, the difference between water and salt, and a combination of water salt with others. But the Tosfot and the Ritva have a lot to explain here, and I wish to have more time because I get all your signals that we need to go a little faster. Okay. So they ask, is that mean that you can do it in the including all of that together? One permitted? He said, Ein, yes. Ve'atanya ben Bagbag Omer. Bagbag, if you remember, we discussed it in the Mishnah in Avot. He said, because the Torah said it's a process. They said that you should take the money, and they said babakar or batzon babakar, melamed shelokchim bakar al gav oro. So it means that you can take a bakar, an oxen, by the way, with his hide, and uvatzon in the flag melamed shelokchim tzon al gav gizata, on sheep, by sheep and its fleece. And the same apply by yain and the wine. Melamed shelokchim yain al gav kankano. That you take the kankan, that it's coming out to the chulin, it's different. Ubashechar melamed shelokchim temed. You take the money of the tithe when you combine these seeds with the water. Mishech meats from the moment of once it was fermented and acquired the flavor of wine. So now we discuss with Ben Bagbag. אמר רבי יוחנן, מה מתרגם לבבקר אליבא דבבגבג? מוביל למאנה הבטרי לבי מסוטה. I'll carry his garment to the bathhouse, which means I need to understand my time, why it's hard to understand babakar. Kulu tzriche, everything I understand, except for the word babakar. The lo tzarich. You don't need it. Why? מה צריך? עדי כתב רחמנא בבקר, הבא מן הבקר הוא מזדמן על גב אורו, משום דגופהו, אבל צאן על גב גזעתה דלאו גופהו, הם לא. It's not part of the body, it's not. והיא כתב רחמנא בצאן על גב גזעתה, הבא מינה משום דמחובר בה, that it's attached to her, the צמר. when you take it. אבל יין על גב קנקנו, but wine, but if you take wine together with his jug, so you said no, the second tithe may not be spent this way. So it's necessary to use the word with wine. Because you save the wine in the jar, so it's combined together. And Rashi here used the word kiyua, and I explain in my book the meaning here of the klomar in Rashi. We don't have the time for that. We may say no. So the Torah said the word on strong drink. And if the Torah said on a strong drink, that's applied to what? To dried feed from the town of Kleya, which was a choice of juicy figs that you can intoxicate in effect. The feira'u, that it's considering a produce, so you don't have this avla'a when you take it. Aval yain al gabei kankano, but if you take a wine with his jug, so eimalo, you may say now that you cannot combine it. וכתב רחמן יין על גב קנו דיינו תירות אבל צאן על גב גזעתה, אם לא, כתב רחמן הצאן אפילו על גב גזעתה. So in short, you need each of them together. בבקר למה לי? So now why you need the word an oxen? והחליט אם לא כתב רחמן בבקרה והמין הצאן וגבורה. That you take this flag with his skin in, so you can purchase both. על גב גזעתה לא, but it's fleece now. So he said, דאם כן, כתב רחמנה בבקר להטוי אורה, היתר לצור להטוי גזעתה. So you need both to include a fleece, which means that the sheep may be brought even with his fleece. אילו כתב רחמנה בבקר, but if the Torah did not written an oxen, לא עבר מן הצאן על גבורה אין, על גב גזעתה לא, you not have said that the sheep together with its hide, yes, but otherwise not. דאם כן לכתוב רחמנה בקר, otherwise the Torah should say on sheep, ומילא היתר לצאן, so you understand indirectly the sheep remain available for interpretation. וכיוון דכתב רחמנה צאן, but since the Torah written on sheep, we're teaching that sheep may be brought with the second tithe money, אפילו על גב גזעתה, even together with his fleece. בבקר למה לי? Why you need an oxen? השת צאן על גב גזעתה מזדבינה. Now we understand that sheep may be brought with its fleece. It's necessary because the ox may be brought together with its hide. בקר על גברו מבענו, כלומר רבי יוחנן מנתרגם בבקר עלי בדבקבק מוביל למעלה לבין מסודה. So that's the reason why I said, if anyone will explain it to me, I carry his clothes after him into the bathroom. So it's just expression. Ritva said that you can take this part of the animal while they are still alive, but even if you purchase it while it's slaughtered, it's fine, because usually people buy in the Ein Yafain, a large measurement. What's the difference, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish Rabbi Eliezer, that allowed to use the money of the fish in the tithe, and the one who forbids, in our discussion, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish Rabbi Eliezer dar sheribuy umeute, v'anetanik drashi klal ufreit. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gadish and Rabbi Eliezer expound on the verse by miute, by the amplifications and restrictions. And the Tana expound based on the principle of very generalization and details, which is a different approach when you have Agadah. Now we elaborate. I said that you should take the money whatever you wish. So that's amplified. You derive from that Bakar, Tzon, Yain, Shechar, all these four. So that's Mi'et, so that's you derive from that. You reduce from that. ובכל אשר תאווה נפשך, חזר בריבה. When he said, repeat whatever your soul requires, it was again amplified. So he said, ריבה ומיעט וריבה, ריבה הכל. So when it implies and restricted, and once again implies, it's imply in general category to include everything. My Rabbi, what's the amplified in the category of that includes? Rabbi kol milei, anything that was eaten. Umay mi'et, and what is restricted in inclusion of that category? So they say Rabbi Eliezer mi'et tzir. According to Rabbi Eliezer, restricted brine that including from the brine is not similar to item listed in the verse. L'Rab Yuda ben Gadish mi'et mayim ve'melach. Rabbi Yuda ben Gadish restricted water and salt. And tomorrow we'll continue with this sugya. First halakha is Shulchan Aruch halakha in 386. One may establish an eruv with all type of food except for water and salt. One may not create an eruv even with both water and salt unless they are mixed together. He said, also we talk a little bit about the carrying zav or involved with the zav, and we said that anything that is zav, that the person have a discharge, is ritually impure. Anything that the zav carry is ritually pure, provided it does not touch, which means something intervening between the zav and the object utilized to carry him. And one who carries that is contact ritual impurity, even if it does not have a physical contact. We talk about a saddle that is susceptible to a ritual impurity, contracted with the zav, ride or something that meant riding. We ask about using a turfles on a mushroom, that we said that it's not to be used for the eruv. Some say that if they cook, you can use it because it became in the food.
Nourishing, yeah.
We said that water and salt may not be used for an eruv. However, if they're mixed together with they may be used for an eruv. But so they said that you have to mix them together, and that's the one to make it available. We said that if you have an ox, one may utilize second-tied money to purchase an ox hide along with an ox, to acquire a jug along with the wine, provided that the payment of the hide or jug is included in the payment of the ox or wine. However, it is prohibited to make such purchases from a merchant, since the merchant knows the price of the hide or jug. The payment of these objects cannot be considered to have absorbed in the other payments. That's the Talmud Yerushalmi and the Rambam, Hilchot Maaser Sheni, chapter 8. The last halakha I would like to share with you, it's in regards to temed sheikh meats. Meat that was fermented may be purchased with second tight money, and again that's Rambam Hilchot Maaser Sheni, chapter 7.